Hello, everyone.
How is everyone doing? Okay, that's great. So we will start right on time so that we can be mindful of when we start and finish.
That's great. Yeah.
So welcome everyone. Hope your summer is going well, and it's so good to see so many of you in this busy summer. I just wanted to let everyone know that this session will be recorded, but only in the main room. The breakout rooms will not be recorded. So this is the last of the series for this academic year with HAPS Cafecito. And this is the first time we actually decided on a theme that would start one in fall on belonging, the second one in spring on motivation, and this last one is on persistence. And the goal of this cafecito on persistence is to reflect on faculty experiences that are related to persistence. It'll also review factors that influence persistence. And in the end, we all as faculty can discuss pedagogical practices that can improve our students' persistence, which is perhaps why we are here. We also had one informal meet and greet at the annual HAPS conference. So if you were able to get to that, maybe you can just put a thumbs up or put your name on the chat. I know it was a meet and greet, and I heard that there was a lot of great success and camaraderie. So we would like to thank you for promoting the HAPS Cafecito at the annual conference. I would like to just introduce myself and pass on to my fellow collaborators. I'm Sheila Vemu. I'm an associate professor of biology. I teach anatomy and physiology and microbiology at a rural community college. The name is Wabanzi Community College, which is in Illinois. And I've had the pleasure to run these HAPS Cafecitos with Marisol and Rosanna, and I'm going to pass it on to Marisol for introducing herself.
Thank you, Sheila. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the HAPS Cafecito in Student Persistence. My name is Marisol Lopez, and I am an assistant professor at Boston University School of Medicine. I am in the Department of Physiology, Pharmacology, and Biophysics, and I teach physiology at the medical school, dental school, and master's levels. And I am happy to be part of these cafecitos, and I hope everyone enjoys this session.
Hello, my name is Rosanna Darang, and I am a lecturer at Emmanuel College in Boston. I'm mostly teaching, of course, anatomy and physiology, but I also teach microbiology and nutrition. I'm also affiliated with Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts, and have been teaching A&P for almost 30 years now. Okay. So I'm happy to be here with my colleagues Sheila and Marisol for Cafecito. And you've heard from us and would like to hear from you. Introduce yourselves, but in the interest of time, if you could use our chat room to state your name and where you're teaching at or where you're from, we would appreciate that. So I'll give you a few seconds or so as you do your introductions in the chat room. Maybe some members you'll meet in our breakout rooms later on. Okay. So as you do that, okay, thank you. Uh, we're going to start off with an icebreaker and send everyone to the breakout room with a theme to reflect on. So we would like for you to reflect on your own experiences of persistence. Think of a time in your life when you persisted through circumstances. Okay. And also think of a time in your life when you were not able to persist. Okay. So we will send you to a breakout room and give you a chance to discuss this among your group. But please assign among yourselves a note taker because we're going to come back to our main room so we can discuss your, what you guys reflected on in your small groups. Caitlin is here with us who will facilitate the breakout rooms. But let me just, go back and the themes that you're going to reflect on. When you persisted, and then a time where you were not able to persist. Okay, so we're going to do our large group share. I think we got cut off because we're trying to choose who was going to be the representative of our group.
I think the same
But
thing happened too in ours.
yes, yeah. So who wants to start? Let's do a group share and just discuss probably, a bit of what we were talking about in our own breakout rooms. Okay. Anybody?
I could go if you can hear me.
Okay. Hi, Burhan.
Hi. I don't know which group are we, but I was with Marisol, Gilbert, Jordan, Claire, and who else? And myself, Connor. So the persistent was college days for Gilbert, which was reiterated by Jordan as during her PhD. Persisting through the program and thinking about what worked and what ended up working. And we thought this is a good thing because we sort of put ourselves in our students' shoes, thinking about college and the difficulty of some of the courses. Marisol mentioned chemistry was challenging and algebra as well. For me, I contributed some days that I thought I was never going to get through the draft military service, the first 40 days of boot camp, but it ended up working out. And now I reflect back on those days and think that, full of anecdotal, funny stories and little shenanigans, so to speak. Connor contributed that in tennis that he fitted with some groups and he persisted but not with others, that he thought that it's not going to work out. And so sports, I guess. And that's from our group. I don't think I left anyone out. Claire, you'll get your chance to say something in the next breakout.
Okay. Thank you so much, Burhan.
Yeah.
Any other group?
I can go for my group, although I did not as such contribute to the group discussion. But there was one person who mentioned that they were demotivated to some extent because they were not focusing on the larger purpose or the larger goal. And then there was another person who said lack of motivation was one thing that basically made them very vulnerable. The way the class was structured, the way the exams were, they were really difficult. And this person was not comfortable asking questions because it seemed like the rest of the classmates are very, you can say, intelligent compared to them. So that also demotivated or made put them towards more like towards the back seat because they couldn't ask questions and all in class. That's pretty much what we discussed. We didn't get much time to talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nazish. Yeah. And can we hear from another group, please?
I'll speak for my group.
Thank you, Victor.
We mainly stick with the issues that we deal with in our academics. That's basically what we talked about. The challenges that we did either try to receive our master's or PhD or going through our postdoc.
And if I could add with that, I think we mostly all shared academics because we realized the theme that we were reflecting on was pretty personal. That's why we just shared our academic struggles, but we all had our own, we all had our own things that we struggled with. It's just not, sort of shareable to this group. So we limited it to academics. Okay.
Yeah.
Next, yeah. I think we have one more or two more groups. Let's see. What about your group, Sheila?
It finished. Yeah, Nazish,
Oh, Nazish
Christine.
did it.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we have one more or?
I think Ali is saying that we only had 3 groups, so I think everyone
Oh, we
shared.
only have 3 groups. Okay. So I'm gonna bring the microphone if we were in an actual room to Marisol. Thank you all for sharing that.
We can go to the next slide.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I think what people have been sharing about their struggles or, how did they persist or not really ties into our next part, which is about discussing um, persistence, how we can increase persistence of our students through this article. And the link to the article is in the chat if you want to access it. And this article is by Joe Handelsman, who has been in the field for many years, doing research in many things, but also in scientific teaching. And these practices are, continue to be applicable to everything that we're doing, regardless that the article was from 2013. And so this article discusses a framework to define that is defined by 3 different parts, which we have learning, motivation, and professional identification. And from what I heard from people talking about what was important in the as a factor for persistence, I heard some people were talking about learning or resources to learn and also motivation. And so we're going to be exploring practices within each of these areas. And then after that, we're going to review some initiatives that you can use in your programs or universities to promote persistence in STEM. But most importantly, as we go through this short presentation, what we would like you to do is that you can think of things that you're already using in your classroom or things that you would like to learn more about and discuss more when we get together back in our breakout rooms. So we're going to start with learning. So if Rosanna, could you go to the next slide? And so there are many different practices that can be used to increase learning in our students. If you can click Rosanna, because this is like animated. Okay, so twice. So first, it's important that you provide context to what you are teaching because students then can make connections. Why is this important that I'm learning? So I have an example here of using case studies, and a place where I sometimes get my case studies are from the National Center for Case Study Teaching in Science. And in this particular case that I put here, I use it for the first session with our students it's a applied physiology classroom, which is like a support classroom to the physiology course. And it has a lot on osmosis and diffusion, just basic facts of osmosis and diffusion. And they apply it to cystic fibrosis. So if you can click again, Rosanna. So that brings us to making or using content that can be relevant to the experiences of diverse students, because we know that some populations of people are more have more probability of having cystic fibrosis. So that could be something that you can use. And then if you click again, we have this is an active learning activity because the students are really getting involved in their learning and figuring out as they figure out the case. So all of these 3 practices are going to contribute to student learning. And then we have studying in groups. So studying in groups can enhance individual learning. And so by using case studies, you would have the students work in groups, but also students who are preparing for an exam, you can, I encourage them to study together. I know that the students in my physiology courses, they like the students who are doing well, usually they say they're getting together with the students and they are teaching each other, they're using whiteboards. And so that's something that is going to contribute to their learning. And then next we have providing constructive and encouraging feedback so that students can learn from their mistakes. And so some characteristics that are important about the feedback that sometimes they are difficult to achieve for us as instructors is like make it timely. So don't wait, one or 2 weeks after they hand out the assignment. Try to do it more timely, be specific, and then also actionable, right? So how can they make it different and always encouraging, right? To get better and to give them more opportunities for improving their work. And then another example is about mentoring, and this will be a theme throughout all of this framework about the importance of mentoring and role models in for students learning, and especially for students from underrepresented backgrounds. Mentoring is really important because sometimes they are the first ones who came to college, so they don't have any reference, and that could be a disadvantage. And that helps them also, like, motivates them to continue and to persist. And so mentoring is very, very important. And now I will pass it to Rosanna to talk about the next part of this framework.
So as Marisol had mentioned, the reading that was given to us talks about the persistence framework, which is defined by learning. Marisol took care of that. And motivation, which is what I'm going to talk about. And then later on, professional identification, which is for Sheila. So in the persistence framework, how do we increase motivation using the same educational intervention to promote student behavior? So the educational intervention lists early research experience as the first. Basically, this is providing research for the students because this gives them the thrill of discovery. So when they're thrilled, they're excited, that alone is very motivating. Another educational intervention is teaching methods. So we want teaching methods that promote active learning. We want our students to feel engaged, feel included, because just as what we talked about in our January Cafecito, belonging and engaging teaching methods continue to motivate our students. Another interventional method would be academic content. We want to include content that will impact human welfare. We want them to learn about STEM careers. We don't just want to give them theory, but we want to relate it to their careers. Like we talk about the heart, but we also talk about in nursing. We talk about the kidneys, and then we talk about, in dialysis. Okay? Because sometimes all this theoretical could be overwhelming, but when you relate it to something that they will actually encounter in their careers later on, that could definitely be very motivational. And another educational intervention is also feedback. So we want the students to learn the value of feedback. We want them to receive the message that they're expected to perform at high standards. When you give them feedback, whether it's good feedback or constructional feedback, that continues to motivate them. Mentoring as well. So mentoring enhances research skills, enhances confidence on our students, and of course, increases motivation. Then we have role models. So students, when they see people like them who are scientists, who are anatomists, who are practitioners, that's certainly motivational. You'll see a really nice picture Sheila will share later on with us on how they see themselves as scientists, as their role models. And then we have the last two educational interventions in this persistence framework is study groups. When we allow them to work with their peers, we encourage them to learn with their peers, and we encourage them to be teachers for their peers. Okay? And lastly, when we provide them with educational extracurricular activities, they become more engaged, and just the same, it stimulates confidence, which is all very motivational. Okay? So that's it for motivation. And again, we did have this big motivation cafecito dedicated to motivation last cafecito in January. Let me pass that on to Sheila.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So now we're in the last strand of this persistent framework from this paper, and that talks about professional socialization. And when you think about professional socialization, the paper talks about three ways in which you can sort of build those strands. So you're taking a student who is thinking, imagining themselves to be a member of the scientific community. It could be wanting to be a scientist, but just feeling that you belong to this community and like looking yourself in the mirror and feeling like, I have that moment because I think I can be one of those scientists. But there is also in the persistent framework, there is a place where they say that when students are engaged in the material and they're actually working together in that material and they're getting feedback from each other as a group, they learn by doing, and that is that aha moment in our students, right? We are all instructors, and we know when that light bulb goes on and you see that spark in their eye and they're like sort of smiling and talking among themselves, the language of anatomy and physiology. I think that is the second picture, that is group feedback. And that's why one of our sessions that we had was talked about how you can build dynamic active learning exercises through social engagement in small groups. So, which makes a lot of sense because that's going to increase feedback from among themselves while doing science. And the third place in the persistent framework is how you can take all of these interactions and put it together where these students are actually talking and interacting with advanced scientists, like a poster presentation. It need not always be the HAPS. If it can be at the HAPS annual conference or at the regional conference, that's great. But even at our local student center or perhaps at our college or in our region where they're presenting, they're standing in front of advanced scientists and explaining their dialogue, I think that builds that sense of belonging for them in the field. And to go back to that topmost right diagram that I found that was really interesting is how you can sort of weave the social belonging, right? I identify myself as a scientist. I feel like I'm involved in a group. And then take your academic belonging, which is your coursework, and you're sort of staying in the course and studying and going to the tutoring center. Finally, those two strands meet together, and that's what makes learning so powerful. So I thought this paper was a great pick by our group. So I want to go to the next slide, which sort of summarizes everything that we tried to put together in the 3 slides, which is the 3 strands: learning, motivation, and professional socialization. So we can take any of the interventions, which is on the left side, all the way on the left, and then we can map it to each of our students learning, our students getting motivated by that intervention, and our students getting that professional socialization so that they can feel and belong to this group of scientists. So I know we all do this great work together. So our next set of activity would be for us to think about what educational interventions do you currently use to promote learning, persistence, and professional socialization. We actually all do it, but maybe we don't categorize it in 3 big strands. It's all meshed up together like a cake, but we are sort of asking you to just think about this and talk among yourselves.
Before the breakout room, I'm putting it in the chat because earlier people forgot what we were reflecting on. So you can always go back to the chat, and I typed it in there. Yeah.
So we are in the last part of our session, and here is the large group share out. So we could start with group 1, 2, or 3, whoever would like to sort of bring together their notes from what people are already doing and interventions and reflections. Who would like to go first?
I think I'm from 3, so we can
Okay.
start. So we have people that do a flip model for some classes, do traditional lecture for other classes, and as we had some high school as well. And I think the unifying theme was that we all provide them with at least some type of clinical problem or case study type setting or access to research, timely research that we present to the students or provide for the students and have them get involved in that way, hopefully making it applicable to them, to their lives, to their own health or well-being or others that they know. Another thing that we talked about was identifying our students as being scientists, so to speak. They're at least in a professional program or working towards a professional program. And so reminding them that they're progressing towards that profession and kind of giving them expectations of that. But then we also had the discussion that there's call it a disparity between our expectations for professional attitudes or behaviors and the maturity level of the students and what they can appreciate in terms of us trying to give them the information that they need versus the information that they want, which is tell me what's on the exam and teach me how to succeed in the exam versus learning the base material that you're going to need in your profession or even in the next course that you take, and acknowledging that they may not be ready for that and they may not appreciate that professionalism, but at least we're planting that seed a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Thank you. We're also trying to take some notes so that we can have it ready for others as we move forward. The next group.
I guess we could go next. Group, I forgot our number. I think we are number 1. So we have comments from Claire on a self-evaluation after finishing an activity and the impact of that on improving performance in the classroom. Connor mentioned something neat regarding anatomy and physiology class taking measurements and giving them to colleagues in the physics, if I understood correctly, where those would be analyzed and returned to the classroom where the students would be practicing science, basically using maybe authentic data, if you want to call it that, or novel data. Gilbert mentioned an important point regarding a large classroom, and we went into a small discussion on if you have a large classroom, depends on if it's a required classroom for the degree or if it's something that is an elective. So typically larger classrooms, at least in my experience, the students would persist even though their grades might not be optimal at the end because they have to get it over with and get it done. And Vital contributed the need that we want to help and we want the students to have some easygoing classroom, as Jordan was suggesting, to have some rapport built with the students and ask them to evaluate their own exam experience using Taco Bell sauce ratings. So Vital mentioned that if they are going to be nurses working a 12-hour shift, they need to be reminded that everything they learn is important, critical, and the job market is not going to be an easy one for them, which is a valid point. And sometimes I remind my students of that indirectly. And not to take too long, I mentioned a point regarding minority scientists working with science so that the students would have an idea of seeing themselves doing science, empowering them in many ways to be either in a lab, in a research position, or seeking graduate programs later on. So I use papers that I post in Perusal, and I choose those that they would have a minority scientist or a scientist from the campus, like a stem cell trial from the city and the University of Pittsburgh. And recently, I was in a training, and I have not implemented this in my classroom yet. I put the link in the chat. It's by BioQuest, and I think Sheila is one of the people who contributed modules for this training. So in this last training, it's called Biography with a capital I. We choose a paper written by a minority scientist and have an interview by Zoom, edited by YouTube with that scientist. And we explain to the classroom the graph using our words and our language and using the videos that are contributed by the scientists. So for me, I'm talking to Jonathan Wisco from HAPS, and we are talking about cross sections in the brain and quantifications of those for an anatomy setting. I want them to learn the brain anatomy and histology, but also I wanted them to see that Jonathan could be you as somebody of Asian origins and so on. And I think I will stop here.
That's great. So many good notes. I hope we have a chat function where we just save all this and put it in some kind of a blog post down the road, right? So the last group, which is ours, Christine, you ready?
Oh, great. Hopefully no cats jump on my lap. So we talked about, Nasish kind of got us started with discussing games and using games to engage students in their own learning. And that can be Kahoot, or Nasish talked about the immune system game that was presented at HAPS this year. And then there was a lot of talk about closing the theory practice gap. I think that was Dimitri's turn of phrase. Sorry. So a lot of us do case studies. Dimitri talked about doing some hands-on skill building activity that is going to connect well with their future clinical work. So just kind of like a stop along the way of building those skills, but introducing that stuff early. And then John talked about doing, it sounded like similar hands-on activities, but in office hours. And so that's nice because John will cover something in lecture, but then say, we're going to do this hands-on thing in office hours, and that brings students into office hours. And then in that sort of office hour setting, John can ask the students questions, and students can realize if they have gaps in their knowledge or not, and kind of get that kind of feedback early. Laurel talked about doing a medical breakthrough project where students can pick a topic that they're interested in and do some reading on that, and then put together a presentation, a poster and a presentation for the class. And then we talked a little bit about barriers that students don't like talking in front of the class. And Sheila mentioned that she kind of scaffolds public speaking by first having students just give their presentation to a friend in the class and gives a certain amount of points for that. And then the students give their presentation to a slightly larger group, like their lab group, and then they get a certain amount of points for that. And then they eventually give that same presentation to the whole class, and they get some of the points for that. So they're kind of building that comfort level too, with that public speaking piece of things. And then Jason talked about getting students into study groups as soon as possible. But then Jason also mentioned that Jason teaches courses that are 700 students large, which is very different than I think the environment some of the rest of us were in, and asked specifically about how to give feedback in a course that large. So folks had a few things to say about that. TAs and like explicitly training TAs in how to give good feedback, but also potentially using clicker questions where there's a question that's presented to the big group. Everyone uses their clickers to answer it. And then there's some detailed explanation of, okay, the right answer was this, the wrong answer was this, here's why, correcting any common misconceptions. And so again, students are getting that feedback very early. And it's just a part of and then they see that feedback as just part of their learning process. Not the same as rich individualized personal feedback, but in a class that's that large, that's a realistic way to give feedback nonetheless. I think
that's great. Thank you.